Afternoon, children. It's story time with Grandma. Let me move this back a little bit so you can see all the pictures. I wish I could be with you. I hope you enjoy this story. The story of Rapunzel. There once was a woman and a man who had longed in vain for a child. At great length the woman hoped that God would grant her with her very most desire. These people had a little window at the back of their house from which a splendid garden could be seen, which was full of the most beautiful flowers and herbs, but it was surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared to go in it because it belonged to a witch with powerful, great powers. I know somebody that likes scary stories. One day, the woman was standing by her little window and looking down into the garden when she saw a bed that was planted with the most beautiful flowers. These flowers are called rampions, and it looked so fresh and green that she longed for it. Her desire increased every day until she knew that she could not get away from that desire. She quite pined away for it and began to quite look pale and miserable. There she is. There's the garden. She's looking out the window. Her husband was alarmed and asked, "What ails you?" "Ah," she replied, "if I can't eat some rampion, which is in the garden behind this house, I shall die." The man who loved her thought sooner than let his wife die, bring her some rampion himself, let it cost what it will. At twilight he clambered down the wall and into the garden, hastily clutching a handful of rampion, and took it to his wife. She at once made a salad and ate it greedily. It tasted so good to her that the next day she longed for it 3 times as much as before. If he was to have any rest, her husband must once more descend into the garden in the gloom of the evening. Therefore he must let himself down and clamber down the wall, and was terribly afraid, for what he saw standing before him was a witch. And she said, "How dare you?" Angrily looking at him, "descend into my garden and steal my rampion flowers like a thief. You shall suffer for it." "Oh," he answered, please mercy, replace by justice. I only..." Ooh, look at this. "I only do it out of necessity. My wife saw your rampion from the window and felt such a longing for it that she would have died if she had not gotten something to eat from your garden." Then the witch allowed her anger to be softened, and she said to him, "If this is the case as you say, I will allow you to take away with one condition. You must give me the child which your wife will bring into the world. It shall be well treated, and I will care for it as if I were its mother." The man, in all his terror, consented to everything, and when the woman had her child, the witch appeared at once, gave the baby the name of Rapunzel, which means rampion, the flower, and took her away with her. Now, Rapunzel grew into a beautiful child. Under the sun, the most beautiful child under the sun. And when she was 12 years old, the witch shut her into a tower which lay in the forest and had neither stairs nor door. Quite at the top of the tower was a little window. When the witch wanted to go in, she placed herself below the window and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." Rapunzel had magnificent, long, fine, gold-spun hair. Look at it. So that's the witch. And that's the little window in the tower. And she let down her long braided hair, gold-spun hair. There's the garden. And she would climb up there to go see her. Okay. She heard the voice of the witch. She unfastened her braided tresses and wound them round one of the hooks of the window above. Then the hair fell 20 feet down, and the witch climbed up. After a year or two, it came to pass that the king's son rode through the forest and passed by the tower. Then he heard a song which was so charming that he stood still and listened. This was Rapunzel, who in her solitude passed her time in letting her sweet voice resound. The king's son wanted to climb up to her and looked for the door of the tower, but there was none to be found. He rode home, but the singing had so deeply touched his heart that every day he went out into the forest and listened to it. Once he was, and thus standing behind a tree, he saw a witch come out, and he heard her cry, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel let down her hair, and the witch climbed up. "If that is the ladder by which one mounts, I too will try my fortune," he said. The next day, when it began to grow dark, he went back to the tower and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Immediately the hair fell down, and the king's son climbed up. At first, Rapunzel was terribly frightened, but the king's son began to talk to her quite like a friend, and told her that his heart had been so stirred that it had led him to have no rest, and he had been forced to see her. Then Rapunzel lost her fear. When he had asked her if she would take him for her husband, she saw that he was young and handsome, and thought, "He will love me more than the old Dame Gothel does." And so she said yes, and laid her hand in his. She said, "I will willingly go away with you, but I do not know how to get down. Bring with you a skein of silk every time you come, and I will weave a ladder with it. And when that is ready, I will descend, and you will take me on your horse." They agreed that until that time he should come to her every evening. The witch remarked nothing of this until once Rapunzel said to her, "Tell me, Dame Gothel, how is it that you are so much heavier for me to draw up than the king's son?" "Ah, you wicked child!" cried the witch. "What do I hear you say? I thought I separated you from all of the world, and you have deceived me." In her anger, She clutched Rapunzel's beautiful tresses, her hair, wrapped them twice around her left hand, and seized a pair of scissors, and with the right and a snip, snap, snip, they were cut off. The lovely braids lay on the ground. She took poor Rapunzel into the desert, where she had to live in great grief and misery. On the same day that she cast out Rapunzel, however, the witch fastened the braids of hair, which she had cut off, to the hook of the window. And when the king's son came, he cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." She let down the hair, and the king's son ascended. But instead of finding his dearest Rapunzel, he found the witch. "Aha!" he cried mockingly. "You would fetch your dearest, but the beautiful bird sits no longer singing in this nest. The cat has got it, and will scratch out your eyes as well. Rapunzel is lost to you. You will never see her again." The king's son was beside himself with pain and his despair. He leaped down from the tower. He escaped with his life, but the thorns into which he fell pierced his eyes. Oh, my dear. Oh, my dear. Oh. Then he wandered, quite blind, about the forest. Look at him. Oh, my dear. Look. He has his dogs to help. Oh, dear. Thus he roamed about in misery for some years, and at length came to the desert where Rapunzel lived, in the wilderness. He heard a voice, and it seemed so familiar to him that he went towards it. When he approached, Rapunzel knew him and fell on his neck and wept. 2 of her tears wetted his eyes, and they grew clear again, and he was able to see. It's magic. He led her to his kingdom, and they lived happily for a long, long time, happily and content ever after. The end. I'm glad it had a happy ending. I love you. Mwah. Good night. Until tomorrow.